Welcome to How to Land Your Ideal Job with Alicia and Harinda.
Hello and welcome back to How to Land Your Ideal Job, the podcast that offers a step-by-step blueprint to finding and getting the job you want. Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Harinda.
If you followed the job search plan we shared, we bet you found some really great opportunities and even secured a couple of interviews. And that's what we'll be delving into today, the interview and the follow-up. So what's everyone looking for when it comes to an interview? Well, both you and the interviewer are searching for the right fit. Your job is to make their decision a no-brainer. And with that as our goal, let's walk you through what to do before your interview, what to do the day of your interview, and what to do right after your interview. But first, it would help to take a look at the different types of interviews you may have, because some of them could happen at unexpected times with unexpected people and in unexpected places.
It's useful to know if you're looking for work for the first time of the different interview types and why they work for different situations. Pre-screening, this could be a chat with the recruiter or talent management within the organization you've applied for a role. You could have a formal interview, which is you with the hiring manager and potentially a human resources person attending, either together or separately. You could be attending a panel interview where you might have multiple interviewers. And I remember when I was interviewing for a role in the Midwest, I was interviewed by 5 people who sat all around me.
Wow.
And it was an interesting experience because even though it was a formal interview, we were all crammed into this tiny little office and huddled around this small coffee table. So it was really interesting to work out what the dynamic was.
Wow.
But in my mind, I knew that I couldn't relax in the situation. It was still for me very much trying to impress upon my potential future employer that I was the right person for the role. You can also have an informal interview. So maybe you remember last time I mentioned that I'd met a friend at a train station who was going to introduce me to his manager. Well, he did. And we had a phone chat for an hour. Now, in that instance, I'd actually lost my voice. So I was whispering the whole time. But it was a great conversation and it actually did land me my next role. So it was probably more about the content than the actual delivery. You may also be subject to an undisclosed or hidden interview.
This happened to me. I was invited to join a colleague for dinner, and we were just chit-chatting about the company. And then he was asking me how I would structure a particular content team that he had wanted to develop. So we just talked about the approach that I would take and some recommendations. And I had no idea that he was going to follow that up with, well, we've got this new position. We would love you to head it. I did not know that that was his intent from the beginning. And it just goes to show that you never know when you could be interviewed for an opportunity, and just sharing what you know and staying positive in all your interactions can open doors you had no idea were there.
Absolutely. I totally agree that you never know who you might meet on your journey. So, having a positive attitude and keeping your eyes and ears open, you may not even know, as you pointed out, that you are being interviewed for a role. And the last point I want to mention here is around settings. So, in this new post-COVID world, these are typically done still in person or virtual or a combination of both.
Now that we are familiar with the different types of interviews, Harinda, can you walk us through what to do before our interview? Like, how do we prepare for it? And when does the interview actually start?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to say that it actually starts quote unquote a few days before, and you can take as much time as you need to get prepared. But typically, we would cover this in 5 steps. So the first one is really a visioning exercise where you envision yourself in the role. You see yourself performing the tasks that are listed in the job description. Imagine and ask yourself, how would you approach a particular project or a particular activity required of you? Imagine what a typical day might look like. And this may also bring up questions that you might want to clarify with the interviewers as you get yourself comfortable into imagining what your day would look like, what your weeks and time spent in the role would be like. The second point is to really know what's on your CV and to go through it in fine detail. Come prepared, having highlighted those things that you want to bring to the awareness of the potential employer. These are accomplishments that were achieved in the past. Bring those to life in terms of what you did and what the result was. We'll go into that in a bit more detail. They can include stories and may include other things that you have left out of your CV and resume. So you're really bringing your own color beyond your CV and your LinkedIn profile into the room, be it face-to-face or virtually, around who you actually are. And it could be examples, for instance, you hadn't won first place, but you'd taken third place instead. It doesn't really matter. It's about the participation and the effort. That's what counts. And you're getting that point across. If you're self-taught, for example, you've taught yourself coding, self-education shows initiative, it shows hunger, it shows willingness to want to grow yourself and being self-directive in that way. Looking for team experience, think about any sports activities that you're involved with, school projects, internships, volunteer work, and just remember that your newness brings this objective observation, a real fresh pair of eyes that could benefit any organization in terms of a different way of looking at things. Number 3, I would suggest, is that you go through the job description and make sure that you are looking at it and you've aligned it using examples, stories of how your skills meet their criteria for every point. And it might feel like over preparation, but that's better than going in and not knowing what you're going to say. And to this point is, look, be honest with yourself. If there are parts of the role that you don't know, it's okay to say that you don't know. And I will share that I've always been open and upfront about things I don't have experience in. For me, that keeps my conscience clear. And although it might feel like it's counterintuitive, every time I've been that honest, it has actually landed me the role. So I think it goes some way of showing that, look, you're prepared to be vulnerable and talk about those bits that you're less comfortable with, but you have demonstrated how you learn through your CV, through your experience. Like, look, you've done this before, you came from a place of not knowing, and you learned and you mastered something. So the same thing can apply here. And fourthly, there's preparing a crib sheet or a cheat sheet. And I'm going to hand over to Alicia now and get your take on this.
Thanks, Harinda. A crib sheet or a cheat sheet is just a sheet containing notes used in preparation for some kind of discussion, or in our case, your interview. And just to clarify, we're not saying that you have to memorize the whole thing. Just gathering the information proactively and jotting it down on paper helps you absorb the information. So pull out a sheet of paper or fire up a Google Doc and let's prepare one. At the top of your cheat sheet, you can add all the basic information like the date of your interview, the name of the company, position you're applying for, the contact name, and their information too. Then underneath this, we're going to add 6 sections. Label the first section, what they want. In this first section, we're going to make a list of what the employer is looking for. And it's going to be easy because you could just pull the answers directly from the job description. Now label the second section, what I bring. And here, you're going to list all the qualities you possess that fit the requirements that were listed in the job description. You can also add your 60-second elevator pitch here. And if you don't have one, don't worry, because we will include a link to a job elevator pitch generator you can try out for free. I did not know these things were available. It's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the resource page. Now label the third section, who they are. Here, jot down information about the company and the industry. Visit their website and see what they do, like what's their mission and in what ways can you specifically help them succeed in that mission. And be sure to check out the company's social media channels too, because you're going to learn a lot about the culture there. And label the fourth section, What I Like. Here's where you get to list the specific things you like about the company, because being able to share at your interview 2 or 3 things you like about the company just helps to show that you're interested and you're eager to get started, even if it's just something that draws your attention. I remember interviewing a candidate who had reviewed our website and actually presented us with suggestions on how to increase the traffic to the site. That's pretty impressive. Moving on, label the fifth section, My Stories. So here, list 5 success stories to answer those behavioral questions that they might ask. Questions that start with things like, tell me about the time when blah, blah, blah. Or, because thinking about these stories in advance will make it easier for you to recall during the interview. Check the resource page for today's episode. We'll include a link to an article that lists the top 30 behavioral questions to prepare for in an interview. Then label the 6th section, My Questions. In this last section, list 5 questions that you can ask the interviewer about the job or the company or, again, the industry. And consider questions like, what happened to the person who previously did this job? Or how has this job been performed in the past? Or what is the first problem the person you hire must attend to? You can even ask, why did you choose to work here? Or what keeps you here? Or what can you tell me about the individual I'd be reporting to? What are the growth opportunities? So just think about the position in the company and ask questions that are going to help you with your decision should they offer you the job. And if you really like what you hear, you could even follow that up with, what's our next step? So here again are the labels for the 6 cheat sheet sections. Number 1, what they need. Number 2, what I bring. Number 3, who they are. Number 4, what I like about them. Number 5, my stories. And number 6, my questions. And as a bonus, we'll include some more cheat sheet tips on today's resource page. The cheat sheet was pre-interview step number 4, which brings us to step 5, prepare your references. So if an interviewer asks you for references, consider this a wonderful thing because it means that they're interested in you. I mean, let's face it, we live in a time when so much of what we do is influenced by what other people say and think. So if you don't have a list of credible people ready to endorse you, take the time now to start building and nurturing those kind of positive references.
Absolutely. I was just going to add, Alicia, if you don't mind. So you can have the recommendations that people give when you're applying for jobs, but there's also recommendations that people can make for you on LinkedIn that are there permanently. You know, if someone's having a look at your profile, they can see what other people have said about you. So you are also building up a bank of those potentially who see you in different light and can give different insights into your multiple facets of your personality and what you're like.
Brilliant point. Yes, make it simple. As we suggested in the branding episode, you can even save them some time by drafting up a recommendation. And if they're okay with it, to post it on LinkedIn. Ask someone you've done work for to share a few sentences on LinkedIn, what they liked about the work you did and how you did it. And in addition to asking past employers, consider asking former coworkers for recommendations too.
Absolutely. And past jobs could include things like internships, summer jobs, or volunteer work. And think about leaders within your community. They can serve as really good character references.
And if you want to ask your professors to serve as references, just remember that professors rotate through students every semester. So it might be best to ask them for a LinkedIn recommendation while you're still fresh in their mind. The important thing is that your references be credible people who can corroborate your accomplishments and endorse your efforts and speak favorably about you. And as a courtesy, be sure to check in with your reference before your interview, because if all goes well, the interviewer may want to speak with them. So ask your reference for permission to share their number and email. And if you can, give them the heads up if you think they're going to be contacted.
All great stuff. So let's do just a very quick recap of the 5 steps to go through before your interview. The first one we talked about was envisioning yourself in the role. Secondly is to know what's on your CV. Third point is to go through the job description. Fourth point is around preparing a crib sheet or a cheat sheet. And the last one is around gathering your list of referrals.
Harinda, I have a bonus tip from a recruiter. It's from a post entitled, How to Stand Out Before the Job Interview Even Starts. And in it, the recruiter said that she had an interview with a candidate set up for later that day. And that morning, she received an email from them that just blew her away. I guess the candidate made a list and labeled it, Why I Think I'm a Fit for This Job. So they included bullet points listing why they were interested in the company and then added a few about me bullet points. The recruiter absolutely loved it and was even looking forward to the call. So it just goes to show that your interview starts the moment you've made contact, and that includes email.
For me, as I was listening to you cover those 3 points, there's so much confidence in that way. It's kind of being on the front foot. It's also being quite directional in terms of how you want the interview to take place, because you're giving them a whole bunch of stuff. So you're potentially saying, but here you go, this is all the things that I'd like you to know about me. And then they might want to follow a different line of questioning. So I think it's a wonderful way of demonstrating your writing skills, your confidence, your ability to communicate, to start building rapport. There's a lot that is packed into what you just shared with us right now, Alicia.
Especially when you consider that these recruiters could be interviewing hundreds of people. So any way to stand out is wonderful.
Absolutely. Okay, all right. So next, let's have a look at what to do on the day of the interview and what you might need to prepare ahead or pre-interview before your interview actually starts. Let's take a moment to just think about our attire and presentation. Consider what the organization you've applied for the role with, what are they going to be looking for? Think about hygiene. I know it sounds very obvious, but we just have to say it. We just got to put it out there. Consider your presentation in terms of clean and unwrinkled clothing, clean hands, clean nails, washed hair, and really think about job appropriate clothing. Perfume or cologne is okay as long as you keep it subtle. You don't really want to knock out the interviewer with your fragrance before you've actually entered the room. And also smart, clean shoes. I'm a stickler for this. That's one of the things that I used to look at when I was interviewing somebody. Obviously, it's probably less relevant if you're doing things virtually, but still. And what it is that your appearance will let your interviewers see how you show up and allow, as a body language experts say, that you make an impression in those first few seconds, usually before you even speak. So you want to give the most positive impression that you can. And own your presence. Own it. So you've made your decisions, own this. And I'll give an example of this. I decided to go bold once upon a time, and I wore a red suit to an interview. And the interview, although it took about an hour, it was essentially over in about 10 minutes. And I knew the energy had changed, and the person I was working for, she'd finished the questions and someone else was asking me a bunch of questions. But I felt that they were all secondary and just filling the time. And I remember the person who became my line manager interviewed me. She said she knew she wanted to hire me because of the confidence I showed in turning up to an interview in a red suit.
I love
Which
that.
I'd never done before. Yeah, it was different. I felt it was appropriate. It's something I wanted to wear, something that gave me a good positive feeling about myself. But again, really consider the industry you're going to be working in, and sometimes it can be a bit of a fine line. So let's then move on to what goes into your interview kit, because you're not going to turn up empty-handed. Bring a copy of your CV or your resume along with you. Bring a copy of the job description so you've got that handy as well. Bring your crib sheet and, review this. If you're traveling by public transport or something, you can review this ahead of time or just beforehand if it's considered safe to do so. Bring a notepad and something to write with, to make any notes potentially. And if they're speaking, a question comes to mind, you can make a quick note of it, use a trigger word or something, and then return your attention back to the room, back to the interviewer. And bring your excitement and your interest and your enthusiasm to the interview. And this is easier, I say this, it is easy to do in that, look, we usually we're going to be a bundle of nerves in interview, and just kind of, lean into that, envisioning yourself in that role. What about the role excites you? Just lean into that energy. So if you can, just think about your nerves. It's all in the same sort of a degree of emotion, is being able to tip your nerves into excitement. I know this is also obvious as well, but arrive early and notify the recruiter or the persons who are interviewing you if you have ended up facing unavoidable delays, or if you know ahead of time that you're not going to be able to make that time.
And then there's also the virtual interview. So if your interview is going to be done online, here are a few tips to consider. Number one, test your connection the day before your interview. Do this especially if you're using a conference platform that you haven't used before. Number two, check your screen background. Like, is there anything there that shouldn't be? Also, choose a background that keeps the attention on you, something that's not too distracting. Number three, strive for decent lighting. So don't sit in front of a window. Instead, have the natural light stream in directly from behind your laptop or computer. That makes it easier for them to see you. Number four, check your interview attire. Horinda already shared a couple of points about this, but in addition to that, try to keep the upper part of your torso visible so they can see your hands when you're communicating. Number five, ensure your privacy. So if you live with other people, give them the heads up that you're going to be on an important call, and so they don't come in or make any noises while you're on the call. Number six, retest your connection, say, an hour before your interview. Because again, the last thing you need is to have to download a software upgrade like I needed to right before this recording. And point seven, join your call early. It shows that you're responsible and you respect their time.
Thanks, Alicia. So you're at the interview. Well, how do you kick that off? What do you do? Well, think about starting it with a warm greeting, smile and make eye contact. I know this sounds very cliche, but making eye contact is all about you really owning your presence. Say their name and that you're looking forward to have met them, and try to keep an open posture. So no folded arms and across your chest if you can help it. You could put your phone on vibrate. I would just suggest that you just turn it off completely for that time so you're not disturbed at all. And do consider the following. Do this. Listen so that you can answer the questions being posed to you thoroughly. And if you're unclear, ask the interviewer to repeat rather than try to guess what they had asked you and potentially not answer the question. Use something called the STAR technique when answering interview questions. So this would be a situation, task, action, and result. The situation being, what was the problem? The task is how you plan to go about resolving it. The action is what you actually did. And then the result would be a measurement. And if you can measure against some sort of a baseline to show the improvement, that would be really helpful to put, numbers, figures, percentages into the interviewer's brains. Be genuinely curious or help to surface more questions. And questions may arise that you hadn't previously considered as you are talking with the interviewer. Think about who you might be working with. Who are your clients, your stakeholders, your customers, etc. Take notes. Be prepared for surprise questions So you might be asked, why did you leave your last job? Or anything in that domain. And I know that Alicia's already shared a number of really powerful resources, so there'll be more in there that might help you steer you in terms of questions and how to potentially respond to those. And also be aware of any non-verbal communication. So we do send out signals all the time to people without always speaking verbally. And it's just to watch for those.
That reminds me of something that happened to me. I was interviewing for a position and I had to meet with several people. And I remember that I was just about to meet with the vice president. Well, at that moment, as I walked into his office, I could tell something was off. Like the vibe was I just didn't think I was going to get his full attention. So I stayed standing and I asked him respectfully, is this still a good time to meet? I think that at that moment he realized that he needed to switch gears and he said, oh, sure, give me a couple of minutes and I'll be right back. Just want to point out that the way someone else is feeling may have nothing to do with you. So don't take it personally. They seem distracted. But if you face a similar situation, take the opportunity to see if maybe you could reset that moment.
Excellent. Okay, so have some genuine questions prepared ahead of time. For example, what wasn't clear to you in the job description? This is a really good time to get that clarity and think about what might be relevant from a media perspective in terms of what the organization is currently doing or planning. Think about the wider industry and the economy. You could get into quite broad debates within the interview. So maybe think about those sorts of genuine questions that give the interviewer a positive impression about your interest in the role specifically. Note their demeanor, especially if this is a person to whom you're going to be accountable to. Can you see yourselves getting along? And, if appropriate, this might be a question you might want to ask, which is, what is the culture like? What's it like when it gets busy? How do they behave? Maybe ask questions around their behavior so you can make the assessment. Remember, it is a two-way conversation. But at the end of the day, they're also assessing you and also working out for themselves if you're going to be a good fit for the team. I know we've mentioned this before. Be honest and take the time to breathe and pause so you allow yourself some thinking time. You don't have to fill every moment with words. Now, having covered the do's, let's have a quick look at the don'ts. So don't do this. Don't go into false modesty. Don't take sole credit for things that you did when you were part of a team as a whole. Don't complain. Don't talk negatively about a previous employer. Don't just read through your resume at the interview. And I feel that having made that statement, I should talk a couple of words. Earlier on in my career, I was attending an interview, and so this is definitely a do not. I spent the whole hour walking through in absolute minutiae all aspects of my CV and my job history and my career. And even though I was given non-verbal cues, the eyebrows of my interviewer and HR, they just went higher and higher and disappeared into the headlines. It didn't stop me. I didn't read the room. Needless to say, they weren't able to even ask me any questions because we ran out of time. So I felt that was kind of, that particular role was dead in the water, but it was a powerful learning experience, right? Because we're not always taught these things. These days we have a lot more resources available to us, people that we know who are working, etc. But I would say really take time to pause. Don't feel you have to talk all the time. I am going to talk about this in a little bit more depth towards the end. Don't discuss your salary at the interview. This isn't the appropriate time to talk about this particular topic, but we are going to talk about this particular topic within this podcast a little bit later. And then think about how to end your interview. You could offer a recap if you feel confident. This isn't essential, but I found that if you're able to succinctly summarize what the interviewer is looking for, key challenges to show that you've understood what you're going to be walking into about the role, immediate priorities, it can really give the potential employer a sense of how much you've understood about the complexities of what's going on, the dynamics. And it also gives them a sense of, is this person ready for the challenge that they're going to experience in the first few days, weeks, and months? Ask them if they've got any additional questions for you. And, you can remind them that they can get in touch with you if they have any other questions. Thank them and ask for permission to follow up. In terms of a tip, do a personal debrief after you've left the interview. And I would say, either you do this through self-reflection or with somebody who you're close to, who knows what you've been through, to ask, how do you feel it went and what went well specifically? And what element did you feel didn't go so well? And, ask yourself honestly, is this going to be a good fit for you? Trust your gut. And as Alicia was saying in previous episodes, always trust those spidey senses. They never take you down the wrong path. Make some notes or take a voice memo of what you've learned and gleaned from this particular interview. So if there are any learnings, you can adapt for the next one. If you're asked for references, you can alert your reference or your referee so they know, just in case they might be on vacation, and so that you can also plan for potentially a third or fourth person that you hadn't previously considered. So it's also to help with your planning.
So now we move on to the post-interview. After your interview, there really are just two important things to do. The first is something Harinda just shared. Jot down how things went and how you feel about the job. Secondly, the most important action is to follow up with a personal thank you. I once received a letter that read, "Thank you, insert name here, for your time today." And I also received one addressed to someone else at a different company. So when preparing your thank you follow-up, just be sure to apply some care. Now, when to expect a response? Well, if you're working with a recruiter, they should be able to provide you with some timelines and updates, as they're the ones that are working closely with those looking to hire you. But please don't assume that you're out of the running if you don't hear back immediately, okay? Because companies, especially big ones, can have a really long hiring process. I remember someone who we interviewed for a position, and she interviewed with every member of our team. And we absolutely loved her and we wanted to hire her right on the spot. But we had to wait a week because HR still had to assign someone to negotiate her offer. Thankfully, she held on, accepted the offer, and joined our team.
Great. So let's spend a moment or two on what happens when interviews haven't gone so well. And it happens, right? It happens to all of us. So the interview hasn't gone well. What do? The key thing is to remain gracious. It may not be how you're feeling, but outwardly, any communication with consecutive recruiters or in other organizations, you don't want the fallout to really fall out to them. So it's useful to try and remain gracious if you can. Ask for feedback whilst you're still fresh in their mind. What was it? What was it that made the difference between you not being picked and someone else being chosen? Follow up with a thank you and see if they are agreeable to a brief call for 5 or 10 minutes. And if they do offer you this time and say yes, then stick to that time limit and be respectful of that. Have a listen in terms of what could I have done better, and thank them for their input. This isn't the time to start, challenging them on why they made the wrong decision. You're really asking for feedback at this point. And what it shows is that it builds character and it demonstrates that you can take constructive feedback. And it leaves them with a positive impression of who you are in terms of your interaction with them. And I will say that this is true. who's to say that a different opportunity might not come up and you're the person that comes to mind because you went that extra mile to ask for feedback, to be receptive to hearing what they had to say, taking that on the chin, absorbing that, and then using that as an opportunity to learn.
And just to clarify, when we say remain gracious, that includes the recruiter too.
Absolutely. Everyone involved in the chain. Absolutely. So, I'm just going to make a quick point here, just in terms of resilience. I went through a period where I had left an organization, having worked there for a very, very long time. And I took off a few months as a break, and then I started looking. And I remember, because I kept a list, I'd applied for over 100 roles. I didn't hear back from some of them. Some of them wrote back to say I didn't have the experience. That was really tough going. And I would say, yes, it can leave you feeling dispirited, and, that it feels like a real slog and that there isn't light at the end of the tunnel. But I think it's also something there about, sometimes this is what it takes, in that the more interviews that you do, the better you get at it. You start to learn, you become more aware of what's being asked of you. You take what the learnings from the previous encounter and you apply those to the new one. So I would say stay positive and keep at it. Sometimes it feels like a bit of a numbers game, but it is also to do with your mental attitude and building that inner strength. None of us like rejection, but I found there's nothing like rejection that brings out our fighting spirit. And your next job or your next career is only one interaction away. I'm just going to say one final word on this whole salary discussion. So normally what would happen would be that if you've seen a job, it will mention the salary or compensation package in the job advert. If it's not mentioned there and you've got in touch with a recruiter or the talent management within the organization you'd like to apply for the role, you would have those upfront conversations to arrange an interview, because you've met your criteria and met their criteria in terms of what they're looking for. So you have those broad, high level discussions at that point. So you can do it before the actual interview takes place. If that is not discussed then, you can ask the questions up front ahead of the interview with the individuals broadly, to ask, what does this role pay, etc., and some of the other benefits. And if that opportunity doesn't arise then you've had the interview, you've got the job, congratulations. You will receive an offer letter which will stipulate all the benefits related to the role. And at that point, if you've got any questions or you feel the need to negotiate, that's when you would get in touch with the organisation and go through refining the contract. So you're really looking at your offer letter or your contract at that point, and that's when you would negotiate then. So we're just going to take a minute and just say, there's a lot of content in here. So this might be one of those podcasts that you might want to listen to a couple of times, just to make sure that you've gleaned as much as you can from it. Our heartfelt intention is really to help you feel as prepared as possible and ensure that the interviewer has seen that you are prepared, and that this is all going to help you land your ideal job.
Thanks for listening.
Do make sure to visit our resources page, where we include links to all the articles and the tools that we've referenced to today. And check out our other episodes, because when you combine the information with what was discussed today, you do level up your chances of landing your ideal job.
We hope this episode has been helpful, and if you know of anyone else who would appreciate this information, please share it with them. We look forward to sharing more on how to land your ideal job.